What if I knocked it? Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Administrative Committee. We are going to start our meeting with the approval of the committee meeting notes from January 22nd.
I looked at them last week and thought they were fine, so I'm going to assume they're still fine.
They look good to me as well.
Okay, I'm going to pass that. Next on the agenda is the 2024 Moscow Farmers Market Handbook with Amanda Argona.
Good afternoon. So as indicated in your packet, we have your 2024 Moscow Farmers Market Handbook. For those of you who aren't aware, it's a pretty extensive process to go through the revisions each season, but we've got it dialed in pretty well. Before it even reaches council, vendors have an opportunity to provide feedback as well to the revisions and edits. We don't do track changes. This is a very hefty document, and sometimes those can get lost. So we do this PowerPoint presentation. So you'll see some highlights where there were some key changes. And in some cases, when there was extensive revisions, we didn't do highlights because it was such an overhaul, but we do original and then the revised version. So just for those of you that aren't aware, the Farmers Market Commission has a policy subcommittee that reviews the handbook every year alongside staff. So goals are to make sure that the policies are keeping in alignment with the mission and vision of the market. We definitely try and remove redundancy where possible, and then clarify things. Usually I have a nice marked up handbook from the whole season, from things that I hear back from vendors and the like. And then the subcommittee meets about 3 times, sometimes 4, but they had 3 meetings, and we had Josh Larson, Colette DePhelps, and Jenny Parker on our subcommittee policies this last season, and Cody Riddle led the charge in my absence, and I think he did a great job because I saw that we had cut out some time. So ultimately, the subcommittee members served an additional 8 hours on top of their commitment to actually attend the monthly meetings. So this is a really big deal that they take time out of their day to be reviewing these things. Each review, or each time the subcommittee met, there was a review by the Farmers Market Commission as a whole to make sure that they're on track and that they're not wasting their time. And so we'll just jump right into it. We had some changes to our agricultural vendor definition. This has been based on some site visits as of late, that we were just wanting to make sure that we were really clear with the expectations of the types of vendors that we were recruiting to the farmers market. And so you'll see that ultimately the proposed revision that we have is including additions of building soil health, promoting animal welfare, and supportive and environmental stewardship. And these are things that we would be able to verify via the site visit. And that site visit is just confirming the types of practices that our agricultural vendors themselves are putting into FarmSpread, which is our registration system.
I have a question, and it's ignorance. It's not smart aleck.
Yep.
How do you encourage someone to be hygienic?
Oh, that's a great question. So we've actually had a few site visits where we want to make sure that your post-harvest, like water and the containers that those post-harvest items are going into. So making sure that you're using bleach that's good for food grade containers, that sort of thing.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry for the tiny type. Again, we really focused on some changes to the agricultural vendor page specifically. And so we just wanted to really clarify what we mean when we say forage. We just had some questions coming up of, well, what happens if I'm harvesting mushrooms and then putting them into a soup or drying them? Is that a value-added product? Is that not a value-added product? So we just wanted very specific clarifications on what we mean by forager. We changed meat to livestock. That was more encompassing. And we also moved our fiber and hides, which would was previously in our value added section into the livestock and poultry because it is a raw product. There's not a whole lot more happening with the hides in particular when it comes to that item. The value added, as you can see, went through some extensive revisions. What we really wanted to get at and recognize here is that a lot of our vendors may not be producing on land, but they are going and spending the time and sweat equity to go and forage items to then create a value added product. And we didn't really have that clear in our previous definition. As an example, if you weren't at the market this last season, we had a lovely elderberry vendor new to the market, very successful. And so some of those elderberries are being foraged on land that they manage, and then others are being foraged on land that they have access and permission to collect those items. So we just, again, wanted to provide the clarity to what we mean by a value added product. That's where a lot of ag vendors actually make high value items for sale. But I'd be happy to answer any questions specifically about the value added because it was overhauled quite a bit. But I'll also move on if you want to save your questions to the end. Vendor operating policies. We have an annual vendor orientation every year. All of our vendors are required to attend. We also realize that our vendors are human, just like staff is human, and sometimes things come up and we do want to make sure that there are alternatives to those vendors so they are meeting this requirement and not just skipping out on it entirely. And so we essentially added the alternative to the in-person meeting. And it's kind of silly, but we essentially record the meeting and then we provide them a list of questions like how many times do I say pink elephants in the meeting specifically for those vendors so that we know that they actually watch the whole meeting through and understand what's expected of them. So we do try and add a little bit of humor into these policies. Most of the time, vendors are really great in accommodating this, and they're really good about letting me know if they're going to miss it. And we put them on a list and make sure that they get access to the YouTube video, and then they answer an email with several funny questions. We have new policies. We always send our policies to legal for review before it reaches this body and ultimately the full council. And so we did have an addition, specifically some questions about U.S. copyright laws. It's been a longstanding unspoken policy for our craft vendors in particular that you cannot make money off of trademarked and licensed characters. So we're talking Seattle Seahawks, more in particular, University of Idaho and Washington State University, right? They will come and protect their assets. So we just wanted to be adding a policy in there to actually address it. Again, long unspoken. When Kathleen Burns was managing the market, she made this pretty clear to folks, but we're just seeing more and more of the ability for folks to download these items, slap them onto some process that they're making. So now we have an actual policy to help back us up with that. And it's really for the vendors to protect themselves as well. And with that, those are the revisions for this year.
Wow, I thought there'd be more.
Short and sweet.
Well, I know you, I'm on the Farmers Market Commission and I know how hard you work on these and I appreciate it. I know like it's so detail oriented. You guys are
pretty amazing.
so knowledgeable. It just was amazing to hear you guys talk about it. So
Yeah.
I don't really have any questions because
I don't either. You have come a long way, baby. That is some serious policy
Yeah.
from the days when I was writing the beginning of it. So I'm very impressed.
Yeah. It's nice to see it all in one handbook that we can always reference and not in several piecemeals. So
Are there any things that come up that the vendors are really focused on that they bring to you a lot that you had to change this year, like the value added thing or anything else?
I think it changes from year to year. I think one year we had some questions about from tier 3 vendors who either were going through pregnancy or serious family issues. And there's concern about losing their space assignment if they can't make, the required dates, attendance dates. And so I believe last year we had addressed that in our policies, talking about that, like in cases of bereavement, elder care, that sort of thing, that those vendors, we're going to work with them. But just so it was a little bit more clear policy, I think there's been some weird growing years, and vendors always want to know, how does that affect me and my product and getting to market and adhering to the policies? So our vendors do read the policies, which is really nice to hear. But I think each season is always a little bit different. But those things definitely filter through the commission, and then we hear them all throughout the entire season, and then have that one time to kind of come together to address things.
Thank you.
All right. Can we leave this on consent or? Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Amanda. Can't believe it's almost time.
Next. Next on the agenda is the ordinance amending Moscow City Code Title 4, Chapter 3 regarding self-storage facilities. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Well, I can't say this is as exciting as farmers market policies, but maybe a close second. I'm actually disappointed Drew's not here because this is one of the amendments he worked on.
Right?
You know how excited he got when we were working on that at Planning and Zoning. So this is pertaining to self-storage facilities and amending the zoning code of the city. So starting off, what is a self-storage facility under the definition within the zoning code, as well as the North American Industry Classification System, which the city's adopted. So establishments primarily engaged in renting or leasing space for self-storage. These establishments provide secure space, an example, rooms, compartments, lockers, containers, or outdoor space where clients can store and retrieve their goods. Currently permitted in the motor business and industrial zones, so pretty limited. And then it's a conditional use permit in ag forest and the farm ranch zones, which the city doesn't really have a whole lot of those zones, or more county zones. So just to give you an idea, everybody understands what we're talking about. This is just a example of current development, Rodeo Drive, Main Street to the west, and then Jefferson Street. So this is the idea of backing up against residential property, but typically within the city of Moscow, it's single-story metal buildings with individual rooms, roll-up doors. So just kind of a broad idea, city continues to allow and encourage a range of different housing types to be developed within the city, some of which are constructed on smaller lots which have limited storage space. So in order to accommodate these developments that allow for more efficient, innovative housing types, so it'd be increasingly imperative that an adequate number of storage options are available within the city. And so this is really the reason we're looking at expanding self-storage facilities within the city.
What do you think? I don't know if you know, but that's kind of vague. Well, what is adequate storage for the city? Do you have a number in mind, a goal in mind, or just when people complain to try and have the opportunity to build more?
Don't have any numbers, but certainly with newer development, with townhouses, sharing common walls, there's limited storage space there. A lot of houses have single 2-car garages. Usually store some things there, but you also have RVs, boats, things of that nature that you start to get, smaller PUDs with smaller lot sizes, which is the city's promoting. You're starting to limit yourself as far as if people still have those personal items where you can store those. And so that's really the goal here is, we're intending to promote this density in the city and more efficient housing types. And, people still are going to have things, unfortunately, and need a place to store those things. And, if it's located in close proximity to residential neighborhoods, then, fewer vehicle trips, more convenient. And so there's a lot of benefits. And you start to see that around town as well, just like this Jefferson Rodeo Drive example. It's right up against duplexes. I go to a chiropractor in Pullman, so I drive along Terraview. And there's a lot of student housing, but then you have a storage facility right next to that student housing. So makes a lot of sense, but that's really the idea. They also tend to be good neighbors. So, typically a low impact use, minimal traffic, parking requirements, limited hour of operation, and there's no water or sewer demand typically unless there's an office associated with it. So this is what we'd be proposing. This is the current use table, just an excerpt of storage services. As you can see, currently ag, forest, farm, ranch is a C for conditional use, and then motor business and industrial is P for permitted. I'd be looking at inserting self-storage facilities as a permitted use within R3, R4, residential, office, and neighborhood business. So 2 residential, and technically those are 2 commercial zones. Residential, office, and neighborhood business are technically commercial. And then the superscript 1 there, which would take you down to the notes section, which says subject to specific use standards within the zoning code. So we have development standards for a lot of different uses in order to help mitigate the impact of those uses.
Does that mean not one like on the Pullman Highway that's 2 stories and big enough to store RVs? Is that what you mean by specific uses and that?
Yeah, we
Okay.
can go through the standards, but yeah, it would limit
Yeah.
those to more of a residential scale instead of,
Perfect.
larger facilities. Certainly the storage spot on West 3rd as you're approaching Gormley.
Yeah.
It's 2-story facility. I don't know that you'd want a 2-story facility looking down on the backyards of a.
No.
I don't think I would. So that's a lot of the conversation that resulted in these standards at the Planning and Zoning Commission level.
Okay.
So typically with standards, we have applicability and purpose statement. It's really just to minimize the impact of the use on adjacent properties in the neighborhood. Minimum property size is the first standard. So minimum parcel size self-storage facility shall be 1/2 acre in size. And Planning and Zoning Commission. So we looked at a number of other jurisdictions when we developed these standards, kind of in the Northwest, but also across the country. And a lot of them had minimum property size, and wanting to not have a self-storage facility located on your 6,000 square foot lot right next to you within a subdivision. And so it's just to kind of control the scale of these larger facilities that you're able to buffer a lot of the impacts that come along with them. Property setbacks, residential zones have minimal setbacks just to build that orientation of the structures to the street and build a more walkable neighborhood. And so we want a little bit more separation here for self-storage facilities to reduce their impact on the neighborhood. So we've just set, and they range between zoning districts as far as the setbacks. So just proposing a standard set of setbacks, 20 feet for the front and street side, and then the rear would be 10, and they'd supersede the other setback requirements. Building orientation, this is common as well. So just access doors of individual storage units shall face the interior of the site. So this reduces the probability of nuisances. If all the roll-up doors and the noise and the headlights, there'll be no travel lanes on the exterior, and so everything opens towards the interior of the site. And so that prevents a lot of the nuisances from adjacent properties. Building height, 14 feet. So this is consistent with our accessory structure regulations within residential zones. So you don't have, standard building height for those residential zones is going to be 35 to 40 feet. And so like we just talked about, don't necessarily want a structure 2-3 stories in height.
Right.
And so the commission had talked about that. And then hours of access, so limiting that to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And once again, just as, adjacent to residential areas, minimizing the impact and the nuisances. And so I think that coincides with our noise ordinance as well. Landscaping, a type A landscape buffer shall be installed and maintained around the perimeter of the entire site. So this is common in other jurisdictions, but just providing that buffer, vegetative buffer. A lot of times when we have more intense zones abutting less intense zones, then typically you require some type of landscape buffer. And so we have 3 of them. A type A would be required around the perimeter of the site to help fit in with the neighborhood and buffer some of the nuisances. Interior access, so just kind of spelling this out, that no less than a 20-foot travel lane and be placed within the development and it be paved. So this necessarily wouldn't be a parking lot. So it's the question of whether or not our parking lot standards would apply. So just making this explicitly clear that that needs to be paved. And it's also for fire code requirements as well. Indoor storage. So looking at just the storage of personal property within the self-storage facility. And then we define that. I think this is the state code definition. goods, wares, merchandise, motor vehicles, watercrafts, and household items and furnishings. So, I mean, this is not commercial storage that we want adjacent to residential. So oftentimes there could be some type of commercial storage or hazardous materials, and just making explicitly clear that that's not the intent for these type of storage facilities.
What happens if you do get some hazardous materials there and people around, like neighbors have seen it come in and out? Is there a process that?
Yeah, we would look into it. The fire code is the document that regulates that
Okay.
to a certain extent. So it'd be the fire marshal that would likely take a look at that. And then outdoor storage. And so this is one of the items that the commission went back and forth on, ultimately decided that they like to allow RV and boat storage on the exterior of the site, but all the personal property needs to be inside the individual storage bays or rooms. And with that, with RV and boat storage, it has to be located in the interior of the site and shall not be visible from any adjacent streets or properties. So in order to achieve that, exterior storage facility buildings at the exterior of the site shall include a shed roof design, slopes to the exterior of the site. Building walls that face the interior of the site shall be 14 feet in height, and the walls in the exterior are 10 feet in height. So this is really just to make sure that the RVs and boats are blocked from view, and 14-foot walls, which is the max height, and then shed roof design, just further ensure that there's not going to be visibility from adjacent streets or properties. And so that's what the commission came up with there. And then architectural standards. I mean, a lot of the storage units are meant to capture your eye and direct you to their facility. And obviously the use of reflective, bright or metallic colors on buildings isn't appropriate for a residential environment. So saying that those are prohibited. And then lighting, there are full cutoff requirements within the city. Strictly full cutoff right now underneath our code is just limited to commercial areas. So residential does have some exemptions if they're partially shielded. So this is just making sure this is explicitly clear that it needs to be full cutoff, even though the residential zone may allow something less than that standard.
I don't know what full cutoff means.
Full cutoff is, so you have parking lot lights and they can't project above the horizontal. So imagine the fixture, there's no bulb coming down where it actually shines up. It's more like a dark sky type ordinance. And then limited to 14 feet in height for the total height of the freestanding lights. Then this was another code requirement that was seen in other jurisdictions, and the commission wanted to include this, the proximity to residential zones and limiting that to 300 feet for any property within suburban residential R1 or R2 zones. So you can't have a facility within that distance of those zones. And then a statement about perimeter fence. I mean, a lot of these facilities will fence anyway, just for security purposes, but just making sure that it needs to be fenced, walled, or enclosed and screened from public view and shall meet the standards of our fence code. So with that, that's essentially the standards and our proposed ordinance. So staff's recommendation is to recommend forwarding the proposed ordinance for public hearing at the next council meeting, which is March 4th. I'd certainly try to answer any questions.
I actually had a question. What kind of signage is allowed?
There is signage. It's pretty minimal. So underneath the current code right now, residential zones, we do allow a certain amount of signage.
Okay.
You want I can look up exact square footage.
when we were talking-
It's fairly minimal as far as the total amount of signage.
You don't have to look it up. I'm sure that you've addressed it. I immediately, when you were looking at the brightly colored or the statements about the architectural aesthetic of it, I thought of those big floppy air things. And I thought, well, what about advertising?
Yeah.
So I just didn't know, they're not allowed to have like digital display signs or anything like that, right? It's just a pretty static.
No, it's still based upon the residential zone. So
Beautiful.
yeah, it's
That's-
limited. So you do have some limited commercial uses and institutional uses in residential zones. So pretty much those standards would apply.
All right. Thank you. None of those things.
No floppy things.
I hope not.
What are they called? What is
Just for grand opening.
I don't know what they're.
Just for grand opening?
I just have some concerns about why we would want to do this. Because, I mean, I feel like, these are pretty ugly in general. And isn't the better place for these on the outside of town when you need to have more infill development anyway? So why would we open up land that would potentially be an apartment building or housing or whatever to put in one of these things? Like, I don't understand how that meets what we want with the city.
Well, I mean, the commission certainly grappled with this to a certain extent. I mean, a lot of the infill property that you see within the core of town isn't going to be a half acre in size. They're going to be smaller infill lots that obviously this isn't the highest and the best use. The highest and the best use is probably going to be a multifamily development on those properties. But as the city grows, I mean, for instance, like the Eddington subdivision on Palouse River Drive, you have a number of really large residential office properties right there on, it's like a collector street, Augustine, and then it transitions to townhouse properties. And so, I mean, these are going to be on the outskirts because that's where we're growing. And certainly, looking at promoting infill development, smaller lot sizes, more density, more walkability, multimodal transportation. I mean, you're going to need a place to store a lot of the household items that are associated with kind of the higher density development. And so, I mean, that's really the purpose of this is to.
But wouldn't those areas be more ideally suited for residents, not for storage? Like, as we develop the city, it doesn't make sense to me to put in a structure like this instead of putting in an apartment building. Because you want the people enclosed for multimodal transportation and for walkability and all this stuff. And if they need to get their junk out of the storage facility, then they can take a trip out of town. Or their boat or their whatever nice thing that people keep in storage facilities. Like, it just doesn't, to me, it just doesn't match what we're trying to do with the city.
I think I hear you. And I was asking myself that question too. I think with what we're encouraging though, I get more people, more stuff, the need to store. I understand that. Mm-hmm. Is it our attempt not to dictate what happens in this land? I mean, I guess I don't know how to answer the other part of that question she has.
Well, I mean, they're currently limited areas. So motor business and industrial, we have very few industrial areas. A lot of it's motor business that are adjacent to the highway corridors. But I mean, the further out of town, a lot of these developments are on the outskirts of town anyway. And so it's really just what the market drives as far as what gets constructed on these lots. And if you have just that more flexibility, residential office allows for a wide range. I mean, it ranges from restaurants to potentially self-storage facilities, all the residential uses. But you're going to need, self-storage facilities somewhere in the city. And if they're limited and, there are no properties to be able to build these, I think it makes a whole lot of sense to have them intertwined within some residential areas, especially if they're new higher density apartment structures,
And so here's my other thing. But we're talking about putting them in R3 and R4, right? Residential areas. So if they're good enough to put into R3 and R4, then why aren't they good enough to put into the subdivisions? I think that's a little bit classist to say, like, you can't have them not buy somebody's nice house, but you can have them buy somebody's apartment.
Well, R3, R4 will allow for a wide variety of uses.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times if you do a PUD and you're looking at 3,000 square foot detached single family homes, that's going to be an R3 or R4 zone. So it's just not saying that R3, R4 is just for multifamily. It allows a wide range from single family all the way to multifamily, twin homes, townhouses. There's just a wide variety of uses, residential uses that would allow.
Okay.
And how big, I just don't remember, how large can they be? Did we set a maximum depending on space, how large these things can be?
We didn't set a maximum. The commission discussed that. They felt that a minimum was warranted, but a maximum wasn't.
because looking at Julia's concerns, I mean, I really don't want to see a sea of storage sheds, just massive amounts of sheds, like just go out to the county line at the end of some subdivision, right? Because we are going to grow. And then you have a massive amount of sheds just going onto the mountain, you know, that grow around. It might be on the outskirts of town now, but it won't be in 15 years. So that's why a maximum, I'd be worried if we didn't have a maximum. I don't want 8,000 storage sheds out over here. And then all of a sudden we grow around that.
You mean a maximum number of allowed?
Yeah.
I get it. I was thinking number of units.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Oh, I was,
So earlier we were talking about, and it was in farmer's market, but is there a national standard for the size of our community, a recommended amount of storage units we ought to use or need? Is there a standard number?
Not that I'm aware of. I could go back and look at the research to see. I'm sure there's some type of organization for
Yeah.
for self-storage
How
units.
valid that is, though.
They may put out some type of recommendation.
Yeah.
I want to say that I saw something like that, but I can't.
Well,
I can't think.
I'm
Right, depends
trying
on,
to
like,
answer
are you a
the-
community that has a lot of boats? Is this Florida? Is it, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, all of those would need to be taken into account, right? But I'm trying to answer the question that both of these people have about, are we sure we want to do this? And if we do, how many do we really want?
Well, I think
that's where that came
there's
from.
been testimony that I think even Cody, when he first moved up here, he couldn't find a storage unit. It was a certain time of year.
Yeah.
And so certainly I think that coincides with the calendar for U of I, WSU.
I would
To
agree
a
with
certain
that.
extent. But yeah, I mean, I've heard the numbers. Actually, we talked to a self-storage facility developer as we were developing these regulations. And apparently the most of those self-storage facilities are full.
Yeah.
That's what he said. So certainly a large need from what we can tell.
I appreciate the increased flexibility. I really do. And having just had to get my own first storage unit since we moved here, I appreciate the fact that, it was there. Do you feel like your questions got answered?
Yeah, I know that we need storage. I just worry long-term about what it's going to look like in the city as the city grows up and around massive amounts of residential storage sheds. But I mean, I've been with 2 different groups and we're searching for storage and can't find it. So I know the need is there.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be interested to see if anyone does come to a public hearing and talk about it, So I'm positive on this outcome, supportive, but it makes me nervous, and I'm glad we have a little bit of time to keep thinking about it. And I was in some of those discussions on planning and zoning, and I know the work that went into it, and I know how detailed they are, right? But just trying to think long-term, 15, 20, even 25 years down the line, is this going to all of a sudden be like all these big houses around a storage unit area, which seems sad to me, but I don't know that there's anything. we
But
can
somebody
do.
else might think it's convenient.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should forward it
Oh, yeah.
to the other 3 to have this conversation.
Are we ready to do that? I don't know. Like,
Well, I think it's
Well, it's
it's
just
that or say, no, we don't want anything to do with this.
or no, send it
Send
back.
it back, right? And I don't,
You want everybody to make that decision, though.
That would need to be the full
Yeah,
council to
right.
make that decision. This,
yeah.
this is a recommendation coming from the commission to the city council, and
yeah.
it has to be considered during a public hearing. So
thanks, Bill.
I think we need to invite the other 3 along.
I think we do.
you can certainly provide a recommendation for the full council's consideration, or just advance this to the full council for public hearing and further consideration.
Just advance
I
it.
think just
Yeah, I'm
advance
not
it.
ready
I'm
for it.
not opposed to it, but I'm not ready to put a full stamp of let's do it. I like to hear what everyone else has to say without any.
Okay,
Okay.
Sounds good.
thank you.
Good to see you again.
Thanks, Mike.
Mike's like, I am wide open.
One of those.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Just random questions. Now I need to find out what these are
I've
called.
probably just offended half of these people on the planet, and it's just not a good
I'm gonna
thing.
get you on.
Hi.
Hello. Well,
Next.
I have a much less controversial and blog-worthy
Well, you think
item
you
to
do
talk
anyway.
with you all about.
Can I tell him what it is? Next is task order number 22, Moscow Water Reclamation Facility Intermediate Pump Station with Evan Timar. That sounds really exciting.
Nailed it. So yeah, in your guys' packet, you have a 9-page document for a task order, which is for JUB to perform design and bidding services. Our IPS pumps, they were identified in our recently adopted facility plan. And they are within the first phase of our capital improvement plan that has been identified out there. And so they're kind of their main focus on this component of it is to get us plans and specs for these pumps, and then we will be able to issue this for bidding, and then receive results back, and then be able to come to you all and with a hopefully with a good bid
Yeah.
to be able to present.
Yeah.
How did you select them? Just the regular process, is that
JV,
right?
yeah, they're on our
That's
roster.
what I thought. That's what I was
Um,
trying to come up with on the roster.
They've worked a lot, pretty intimately with us on that facility specifically. They know a great deal about
Great.
that process out there.
So do you want to recommend acceptance? Should we grill Evan for a little
I
while?
was
So-
trying to
kinda
think of
feel
something
bad
to throw
surly.
on you. I
Evan,
came up with a
why would
question
we
at
do
least.
this? This doesn't make sense
It's
to
none of
me.
these things, right? None of. Okay.
Because we don't want the water to do this.
Yeah. Yeah,
All right,
We
we took
definitely
an ugly
recommend
turn.
acceptance of
I-
of
yeah.
this task order.
I feel good about that.
Can we do consent? Could we really throw him a softball?
I'm fine with that.
All right.
I was looking at Bill to make sure that was good.
Yes.
All right.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Sorry, Mike.
Tried. Okay, we can give Chief Nickerson a hard time now.
Sure.
Next on the agenda is assistance to firefighters grant application. Hello.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to comment that Evan had really cool shoes on. No,
Ah,
you didn't notice, right?
I can't see him. Dang.
So Brian and I are here today to request approval to submit a grant application. The Assistance to Firefighters grant is actually under the FEMA umbrella. And it's a program that we've had successful awards for in the past year. It's been
3 years
since
ago.
2019, but we've had 5 or 6 different approvals. This request in particular is for 50 radios, and it's part of the radio upgrade plan that the city has a study and implementation plan for. And it's part of the P25 compliance. I explained that a little bit. I didn't have just a handout or something I could attach that was simple enough.
no, it's
So I thought I'd put a little more into the paragraph wording of that in your staff report. The match percentage on this is 10% for our population area. We're looking at application not to exceed 460,000. And these radios come with a lot of appurtenances that come with them. So I'll let Brian give you a little more detail on what the package looks like.
They're basically dual band radios. So we operate on VHF right now. And there's a potential, depending on how the outcome of the radio project goes. There's an opportunity to do narrowband or to do 700 megahertz, which is a total different spectrum for the radios. So these radios will provide an opportunity for both. So that's why they're a little more expensive. So someday, even down the road, if we switched or somebody else switched, we would have the capability to talk to each other. ISP right now is on 700. I think IDOT is switching to 700. So there's opportunities to talk to interoperability wise to talk to others. So, and we're only allowed to apply for the number of seats that we have in our apparatus. So that's why 50 is the mark. So
And these are ranked as one of the high priority items that they fund. They have high, medium, and low, and these radios are ranked in the high priority category.
the council may recall, we are working on a radio replacement project. So we do have 300 radios, both portables and mobile units in the system. So this would help us replace 50 of those. We do open bids tomorrow just for the base repeaters. Does not include any of the radios themselves.
So expensive. I can't believe how expensive they are.
They are.
The repeaters deal with both the 700 and the,
Yes. So they'll work with whatever we decide the radio system should be for the repeaters. So the repeaters we're going to select are either going to be VHF or they're going to be, 700-800 megahertz. So whatever system we go with, it's going to be one of the two. VHF is our base bid. The 7-800 is a bid alternate because going to 7.8 would require replacement of all of our radios immediately. Where going with VHF would allow us to utilize existing radios and replace them over time. So that's why we structured the bids in that way. There are some economies or potential efficiencies and cost reductions in going with the 7-800 because it would not require 3 of the repeater sites that are in the base VHF because of the nature of VHF versus 7-800 communication. So there are some potential cost savings on the repeaters. We don't think that necessarily outweighs the additional cost of having to replace the radios all at one time, but we wanted to look at the pricing to be able to evaluate that. So this will help us get at least a fairly large chunk of those radios replaced underneath the grant program and only 10% match commitment. So that would obviously be a huge help to the program. And even if we do go VHF, having dual band, if that's what we select, will help us be able to communicate with ISP, which is currently switching to 7-800, and potentially other partner agencies that may be making that change over time.
I have another question. What's the lifespan of one of these radios?
They say 7 to 10 years.
And they're the
Well, it
wearable.
depends.
Are you talking about a wearable?
Yeah, one that's on you. Yeah.
And the mobile units and the
Yeah, 7 to 10 years still, even for that. But we have some radios that are 15, 20 years old. Well, actually, some of them I can go back to.
And the regulations in the grant announcement had 8 to 14,
Yeah.
but we usually don't see them last that long. I mean,
Yeah.
well,
ours are that old, but
1986.
recommendation is to replace them probably closer to 10 years.
Okay.
A couple of them are 15 of them are 1986.
Not bad here, but
So
I have a random, this is almost as random as your question about the floaty thing.
thanks, Mike.
I thought that was a good question about these.
Okay, this probably shows my ability to understand technology, but I keep thinking like, are we investing in old technology? Like, is there something that was going to leapfrog this that we're like, oh, we just bought all these radios and now we're using satellite communication or something?
It's not random.
The real question, that is that decision point between VHF and 7-800. That's the question. And, the 7-800 is protected for public safety. And so you're not going to have interference. The VHF frequencies we're looking at are open. We will license our frequencies, but that doesn't mean somebody cannot step on your frequencies just based on their transmission power, what have you, and so, or you get skip. So VHF does long distance skip on terrain, and all of a sudden you're listening to somebody in Spokane. Where 7.8 does not broadcast as far and is protected, so you've got fewer, and you really don't have many commercial or other agencies on it. That really is that decision point. For us, we're not sure we can make the jump to the new technology to go 7.8 based on the need to replace all 300 radios, and you're seeing the cost of 50 of them right now.
If you use the new technology, will people at home still be able to listen on their scanners?
They have scanners out there that can. Just gotta go buy one. Because it won't be
Wondered. I know there are people out there that
it won't be encrypted or anything like that. So
I think that's a good question. Wasn't random. Is there a reliability difference?
the reliability is the same. Like Bill was saying, the skip and all that stuff. We have that pretty bad right now. And a lot of that's the technology that's antiquated that we have. So when we upgrade, even if it's to the VHF, the technology is much better as it was way back when. And plus, we're going to increase the capability to communicate inside buildings and those things that we have a struggle with right now. So
and we'll go to a simulcast system where folks aren't having to change channel based on what area of town they're in.
Oh, good.
So right now you are required to do that. The system we're bidding is a simulcast, which means that essentially it's sharing all on one channel, so you won't have to switch.
And the other biggest advantage is every time that they take the radio system down, it's one system, one spot. So when it's down, we have to go sit in a training room for the day or half night or whatever it is to make sure we get all the calls. So a simulcast, at least if one system's down or one tower, if you will, are down, then it picks up the other part. So maintenance wise, it's going to be a whole lot better on us and for IS for that matter.
Did you give us a timeline? Because I can't remember that far 10 minutes ago. About replacing all, like how long, is it just a continual grant you probably keep applying for to get them all taken care of? Or
We can. This is an annual
Yeah.
application process, so we can continue to apply. I think actually our first, and it made me remember how long I've actually been with the city because our very first award, I think, was 4 radios. Ed was still here, and it was like 2009. And so,
Yeah, okay.
so we've, over time, I think we had 2 radio awards. We've had breathing apparatus, turnouts, those types of things. So, yeah.
But-
Yeah.
Just to clarify, if this was awarded, though, this would be all the eligible radios that we would be eligible to receive replaced underneath this program.
Well,
Because it's only
Yeah.
the number of seats on the
Yeah,
on the
I agree.
apparatus.
But I will say that you don't usually get your full request.
Yeah.
And so if we didn't, we would
Okay.
apply again next
To
year
get the
for
rest
additional.
of the seats.
Yes,
And then that's
yes.
it. Amen. No more.
Although that was more.
Until we're up to our riding seat
Right,
capacity,
okay.
we could continue
won't-
to apply.
Oh, I see what you mean. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
the 50 is the maximum underneath this
Yeah.
program, depending upon how long it gets us to get the 50 awarded, we'll have to look to other potential programs for police radios or just volunteer
Yeah.
member radios that aren't covered underneath the seats in the apparatus.
And there are other programs under the FEMA umbrella,
Yeah.
like hazardous mitigation. Some things do fall under that for community safety.
Well, I'm sad there. It's radio stuff's always expensive, but I'm all for this. Scares me when people can't talk to each other. So
Oh,
I will say as a dispatcher, it scared the crap out of me when people couldn't reach me and I was in a chair. So, yeah, this is important.
All right, do you want to recommend this for approval?
I do.
yes. Consent?
Fine,
Excellent.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Anything else?
Nothing's,
All right, ready to adjourn?
Yeah. Thanks, Brian.